Distinguished guests, authorities, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like, first of all, to thank everyone for attending this meeting today, this very important moment of exchange and vision. And upon all, Mr. Roberto Messina, President of CIHA, that means, of course, the Senior International Health Association, for organizing such an important event on the eve of International Day of the Older Persons. I would also like to thank the colleagues who will take part in the institutional discussion, as well as the scientific experts who will discuss, among other, adherence therapy as a mean to prevent diseases. According to the UN demographics, the number of people aged 60 and even over is expected to increase in high-income countries from 302 millions to more than 366 million people between 2019 and 2030. And that will be accompanied by a substantial drop in the number of children from 211 million to 202 million. And at the same time, the recent Eurostat data shows that before the pandemic, life expectancy at birth in the EU was estimated at 81.3 years in 2019, 0.3 years more than 2018. That also implies, of course, that it goes without saying, a growing proportion of elderly citizens who have to manage comorbidities and also chronic diseases. This combination shows us our main challenge in the next few years. Balance the growth of elderly population and the sustainability of the member states' health and social security systems. In this view, a healthy and active and hopefully long aging is pivotal, of course. In January 2021, the European Commission launched the Green Paper on Aging, fostering solidarity and responsibility between generations, with the purpose to launch a broad policy debate on aging and to discuss options on how to anticipate and how to respond to the challenges and the opportunities. And one of these opportunities for the EU is, of course, is related to the so-called silver economy. That means all the products and services that reflects the specific needs and the preferences of older people, or those people, of course, as I said, that are classified over 60, which is expected to grow by about 5% a year from 3.7 trillion in 2015 to 5.7 trillion of euro in 2025, an extremely significant amount. The silver economy can open up new job opportunities in several sectors, such as tourism, assistive technologies, accessible products and services, wellness, culture, personal and automated mobility. So as you can see, a very broad range of activities, a very broad range of economical opportunities. Solidarity and responsibility should be, of course, the two cornerstones of the next European health public policies in order, again, to prevent chronic diseases, to guarantee to the older persons high quality cares, but also to ameliorate also their family lives. So as you can see, this is also part of our task, not thinking and not just speaking about the numbers, but speaking upon all about the values that are on which our Europe has been built throughout the decades. And I'm glad again to be here today to discuss with you, to pave the way for a new strategy of aging, a purely and strong European perspective of aging, especially in this moment of huge reflection with the conference on the future in Europe, in which we will be all called to try to reshape the European model and also to strengthen eventually the competencies from the health perspective and for everything that is dealing with the silver economy and the protection of our fragile elder persons. Tackle the lack of adherence to therapy. It's also one of the main problems that we have to deal with. It's the first part of this challenge, since again, it has not only an adverse impact on patients' quality of life, and it increases also the risk of undesirable events and hospital admissions, but it is also the main causes of the inappropriate health spending, with a huge impact on reflection of the national budget of the national European health system. The European Parliament, from our perspective, approved in March 2019 a motion for resolution calling for the establishment of a European Adherence to Therapy Day, which I would like to relaunch again and to reiterate, and which can be encompassed within the new approach settled by the program EU for Health. The new EU for Health program, indeed, as you are probably aware of, is committed to dedicate at least 20% of its budget, 5.3 billion in total, to disease prevention and health promotion, paving the way for a new perspective and a new approach in these lights at the European and the continental stage and level. And I reiterate again that more in general, the adherence to therapy is extremely important, not only for elderly, but also for all the population, because as Franklin Lloyd Wright said once, the longer I live, the more beautiful life becomes. We therefore need to prevent and to promote healthy aging and to improve healthcare to guarantee this perspective for all the European citizens, to really enforce these rights for all of us. So finally, let me introduce to you a very important message from President Roberto Messina, President again of Senior International Health Association. Please, Roberto, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Castaldo. Good morning to everyone, and thank you all for being here today to celebrate for the first time in Europe and the International Day of Older Persons. I would like to thank the Vice President of the European Parliament, Fabio Massimo Castaldo, for his effort organizing this important event. The speakers, journalists, and all those who are watching us from the various European countries. And in Europe, there are over 92 million over 65. That is 20.6% of the total population. Fortunately, the number over 65 in the European Union is destined further in the next 3 decades, thanks to continuous improvement in our state of health. According to projection, they will be up to 150 million in 2015. That will be 28.5% of the total population. Life expectancy in the European Union continues to rise due to the quality of our health service. This means that life expectancy and the burden in Europe is one of the highest in the world, although there are still differences between the various states. The aging population is therefore a key element that must be considered in designing European policies in order to create an increasingly inclusive society for all ages. As European Federation of Seniors, we are committed to promote active aging and healthy longevity, and we also want to make a difference with our activity, especially with today's event. First of all, with the true communication campaign involving several European countries promoting adherence to therapy as a healthcare pillar for the elderly. Lack of adherence is a major cause of loss of treatment efficacy and disability and avoidable deaths. It is essential to improve communication between doctor and the patient to ensure that the latter are fully aware of the importance of their therapy and can become protagonists in the management of their own health. As shown by the research that will be present during this conference, which has been published in prestigious medical journals, the simplification of therapies, for example, through the use of the drug in combination is one of the key elements improving adherence and persistence to treatment. The other way, certainly by using new technology. The importance of a specific program for the management of chronic conditions will be the cornerstone for all the health system of the various European nations. In fact, they will have to deal with a tsunami of longevity due to not only the lengthening of life expectancy, but also to the crisis and bears, which will not be enough to compensate economically and physically the cost of healthcare for the elderly. It is therefore necessary that the European institutions invest in innovative programs that allow to take care of elderly people even at a distance. Secondly, we want to raise awareness on the importance of vaccination. The elderly, as bearers of experience, as wisdom, can have a leading role in becoming promoters to their family by pointing of the importance of the COVID-19 vaccine. It is protects the health of the most fragile people and avoid further damages to the European economy, which could result from failing to control the pandemic. Also, this year we want to dedicate an International Day for older persons to the many examples of courage and hope among health workers from all over Europe and beyond. For nearly 18 months, healthcare professionals have been working relentlessly, saving countless lives and even fighting the many who, despite their best effort, did not make it. Many have also been infected, and although reports are scarce, we estimate that at least 150,000 healthcare workers have paid the highest price in helping their patients. Our gratitude goes to all of them and our immense condolences to their family. I would like to ask for 1 minute of silence for all those we have lost during the pandemic. Our heart to go out to them. I wish you a very good International Day for older person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear President Messina, for all your remarks and the reflection with which you were opening our institutional panel today, and we would want to have remind us that the dimension of the phenomena we are speaking about of aging of the population. When you said that what is coming, it will be a really a tsunamic aging of the population in Europe, and the need, of course, to the institution to comply with, to be adequate in the response to this trend in terms of services, in terms of rights, in terms of assistance, of the fight against the disease. We have an extremely rich agenda, and now it will be extremely important for us to hear directly from the executive body of the European Union, from the Commission, what is going to be the plan, what will be their priorities to tackle that important challenge. And we are going to hear that directly from the words, from the speech of the Madam President of the European Commission, Madam Ursula von der Leyen, that sent us a very important contribution with the video. And I kindly ask to now in this moment to broadcast the video, please.
Thank you, Vice President Castaldo, for the invitation. Distinguished guests, dear friends. There are adolescences that flare up at the age of 90. You may have heard this verse before by Italian poetess Alda Merini. I love this message of confidence in the future. This is what I would like to talk about today as we celebrate the International Day of Older Persons. Because in spite of COVID, our life will continue to get longer. Longevity means, first and foremost, more time to learn, to travel, to do the things you want to do, but also more time spent with your loved ones. This comes with the new and different needs for seniors. And this matters to all of us, young and old alike. Longevity is reshaping our economy and our everyday life. From holiday packages, for example, for seniors, to smart homes, the silver economy is growing by a stunning 5% every year. More and more families are hiring care workers. And by 2030, there will be 7 million new jobs in this sector. And in parallel, workers of all ages demand the right to take time off to care for their loved ones. So it is a profound transformation with impacts on every household, every workplace, and even on the social contract that binds us together. Today, you will focus on two important issues for Europe's elderly people: adherence to treatment and access to care for chronic diseases such as cancer or diabetes, especially in times of pandemic. I very much agree that care must be not just high quality, but affordable and accessible. This is one of the reasons why I have announced a new European care strategy. We want to support all Europeans of all ages in finding the best care solution for their needs. As part of this work, we will also launch a European initiative on long-term care. We will help EU countries reform their national systems for long-term care. And for the first time ever, we will focus at the same time on the people in need of care, as well as on those providing care. This is an issue that is very close to my heart, because caring for someone you love is a unique experience for everyone. If you read the founding treaties of the European Union, you will find a strong and clear commitment. It says, "The Union shall promote solidarity between generations." This is the union I want to strive for. A union for all ages, where generations take care of another, where elderly people get the respect and the care they deserve, and where we all work to leave our children a better world than the one we have inherited. When we talk about longevity, it is not only about seniors, it is about all of us. It is about the values our union is built on. So long live Europe, and long live Europeans.
Thank you very much. And with this very extremely inspiring and inspired von der Leyen that was reiterating a clear commitment on to pave this way from the European Commission perspective, and also a clear ambition to be able to tackle the dimension of the phenomenon in all and every single aspect that is dealing with that. I would like to give the floor to my dear colleague Danilo Oscar Lancini, that is a member of the Committee on International Trade. We have been colleagues since the previous term, and I would like, of course, to hear from his perspective and all the elements he would like to add to this conversation of today, to our dialogue. Please, dear Oscar, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to extend my heartfelt greetings to my colleague, Vice President Fabrizio Massimo Castaldo, and I would also like to congratulate President von der Leyen on the message she sent us. I would like to thank Senior Italia for having invited me to participate in this prestigious event, which undoubtedly contributes to calling European institutions to ensure a better protection of Europeans' right to health. I would like to thank President Roberto Messina for his kind invitation, for his commitment, for the work he has carried out on behalf of everybody, for always acting in the general interest, sharing ideas with all of us in a clear, professional, credible, and constructive way. The International Day of Older Persons forces us to take stock of active aging, bearing in mind that it is a necessity in view of the sustainability of our systems, but at the same time, it's also an opportunity for social and economic development for all European countries. For this reason, the fundamental campaigns to vaccinate the population, to contain the pandemic, and therefore protect the most vulnerable must go hand in hand with another campaign for a new lifestyle, also by resorting to the use of new technologies which may help ensuring active aging and providing care to older people. This also applies to adherence to treatment, where digital alphabetization of older people may play a crucial role in better managing one's health. As institutions, we are right next, side by side with the patients, bearing in mind that the pillars of European intervention should be investments on scientific research, focusing on projects around patients, overcoming obstacles in access to treatment, and overcoming the disparities that exist in this respect, building a healthier Europe, a Europe that is better prepared to meet both present and future challenges. From the scientific world today, we expect mostly real-life data to help us know and understand better the phenomenon we are talking about. Because the world of science today, more than ever, represents the greatest ally of the institutions, and its task consists in supporting decision makers in their strategic choices on health, which will prove decisive for the future of Europe. Thank you.
Grazie mille, caro Oscar. Thank you very much for your contribution. And now we are going ahead with another important video remark and contribution from the colleague Aldo Patriciello. This is member of the ITRE committee, the Industry, Research and Energy and Telecommunication Committee of the European Parliament. And I finally brought this video. Thank you.
Dear friends, dear colleagues, I would like to wholeheartedly thank the President of CIHA, Roberto Messina, for his extraordinary initiative and for having strongly wanted to create this opportunity to share ideas, debate and discuss, on the occasion of the International Day of Older Persons, the challenges of adherence to therapy. For quite some time now, as part of my parliamentary activity, I have been fighting alongside CIHA, since I'm convinced and aware of the fundamental role played by the association in helping institutions have a broader view of the various issues which older people encounter in managing their health and their chronic conditions. Among these issues, poor adherence to therapy undoubtedly stands out, since it is a factor that directly affects the effectiveness of treatment or lack thereof, to which the increase in healthcare interventions and in mortality are directly related. Indeed, improving lifestyle and controlling risk factors is not always sufficient to avoid the serious consequences of these diseases. Appropriate secondary prevention with the right medication can reduce mortality risk by up to 80%. Eurostat data confirm that half of all patients suffering from chronic diseases do not take their medication correctly. Often, they follow their doctor's instructions only intermittently or abandon treatment altogether after a short period. The problem becomes exponential in the elderly, reaching percentages of over 70%, which has serious consequences considering that in Europe, non-adherence to treatment causes almost 200,000 deaths every year, leading to significant social costs. The direct financial burden on the healthcare system in the old continent ranges between 80 and 125 billion euro. And for this reason, 2 years ago, I undersigned the European Manifesto on Adherence to Treatment, which recognizes adherence to treatment as a fundamental right of all people, especially those living with chronic conditions. Associations, together with the medical and scientific world, must increase real data collection and, through it, knowledge of the phenomenon so as to be able to suggest the best patient-centered strategies for overcoming the obstacles to proper treatment. Secondly, they should raise awareness among the population through appropriate information campaigns on the risks of non-adherence and act as a link with the institutions. Only by improving adherence to treatment can we improve prevention of chronic diseases which affect the elderly and, as a consequence, improve their management, thus helping save lives and reduce health costs. My hope is that in the coming years we can raise the bar even further, enriching the contribution for the benefit of European citizens. Thank you all for your presence and active participation.
Grazie al collega Aldo Patriciello. Thank you very much, Aldo Patriciello. And now we will continue our institutional opening remarks with an extremely important contribution from Professor Pierpaolo Sileri, that is the Undersecretary of State for Health of the Italian government. And unfortunately, he was unable to join us today live for a most important institutional duties that he have, but he sent us this written contribution. He wrote that to me and to President Messina, regretting to inform us that due to the other institutional duties, he will not be able to take part in the press conference scheduled tomorrow on the importance of longevity health and healthcare in Europe as challenges, opportunities. And Pierpaolo Sileri said, I really would like to thank you and the European institutions for the invitation, as well as the Senior International Health Association and the European Society of Attention for promoting such a valuable discussion. The event touches upon a topic that I do consider one among the most urgent to address in order to protect the health of the elder population, both at the national and at the European level. In fact, adherence to therapies is one of the key factors to guarantee a health active aging, and a common shared vision to tackle this issue is fundamental. Failure to adhere to pharmaceutical treatments is in the elderly has several consequences, not only in terms of patient health, but also for the sustainability of the economic health system. Following discontinuously or incorrectly life-saving treatments or treatments for chronic diseases can lead to complications and consequent inappropriate accesses to hospital care, which in many cases could be avoidable. I can provide you with some relevant figures regarding the adherence to therapies in Italy, an overview that mainly reflects the EU projections. Actually, after 1 year from the first prescription, less than 50% of patients continue to take the prescribed medicines on a regular basis. Better compliance is showed for the hypertension treatments, mainly in men, because women are less compliant with the treatments in general. it seems vital to transfer to the patients their about the therapies to which they're subjected. Thus, doctor-patient communication, as President Messina was also stressing previously, must take on a crucial role on the clinical practice, and all the healthcare professionals and institutions should work in team to achieve this goal. The dissemination of the widest information on the importance of the adherence to medical and pharmaceutical treatments is also a lever to act on. So every occasion of sharing lessons learned and possible strategies like the event of tomorrow are certainly encouraged. My best wishes for a successful and fruitful discussion. Kindest regards, Dr. and Professor Pierpaolo Sileri. So once more, our gratitude to Professor Sileri for his important message, and also for his daily commitment on these fields, and in general on the protection and promotion of the ambition of our health public system in Italy. And now I would like to continue our debate, giving the floor to the next moderator, Dr. Maurizio De Plano, that will take the lead for the scientific session of today's discussion. Once more, I would like to reiterate my full gratitude to President Messina for all his constant efforts in promoting a real culture of attention by the institution, both national and the European, on the aging of the population, on the needs of our elder persons that are, of course, also those that are defending, protecting, and ensuring the wisdom of our people and the heritage of our culture. And once more, I would like to tell him that I will be extremely glad to have him as a host in the European Parliament at his convenience, when it will be possible to continue this fruitful cooperation and exchange, and to continue build up a sustainable and ambitious approach from the European level in regarding to the defense and the protection of the most fragile of our elder person, that are the roots of this important tree that is called Europe. Once more, thank you, President Messina. I will wait for you in the European Parliament at your convenience, and I give the floor with huge pleasure to Dr. Maurizio De Plano. Please.
Thank you very much, Vice President Fabio Massimo Cataldo. It's really important for me to highlight that this International Day of Older Person has been endorsed by the European Commission, and this is a great success. And thanks to all the institutions that are supporting us in this long battle against the adherence in order to improve the longevity of older people. And as mentioned by the President of the Commission, there are two main issues. The first is access to care for chronic disease, and the second one is adherence to therapy. This is the reason why now we are going that deep in this matter in order to better understand which are the reasons why our population in general, because not only for older people, they are not adherence to therapy. And as Senior Italia and Federanziani, that it's a member of the Senior International Health Association, have run a project in Italy to understand if the fixed dose combination in hypertension compared to monodose drugs could be improve the adherence to therapy. And this is the reason why I'm going to introduce Professor Giambattista Desideri. He's a geriatrician of University of L'Aquila, and he has published a really interesting real life publication on this matter. Professor Desideri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. De Plano, for your kind presentation. First of all, please let me thank the organizer for this opportunity to discuss with you about one of the most relevant criticisms in the management of chronic condition in our elderly population, that is the poor adherence to both pharmacological and non-pharmacological intervention strategies. Indeed, all we know that our elderly population is continuously facing with a great burden of chronic disorders whose prevalence progressively increases with aging. By age 50 years, half of the population have at least one morbidity, and by age 65 years, most patients are multimorbid. Among chronic conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular, and cerebrovascular disease are those with higher prevalence among elderly subjects, with a clear impact on their health status. Starting from this epidemiological evidence, it is not surprising to observe that the polypharmacotherapy is quite common among our elderly patients. Here you can see data from our country which clearly demonstrated that about 75% of subjects aged 65 years or more daily assume 4 or more drugs, while more than 20% of subjects daily assume 10 or more drugs. This represents a relevant criticism since the great burden of pills assumed by our elderly patients deeply influence the therapeutic adherence. Indeed, polypharmacotherapy probably represents the most important factor influencing the complete adherence of patients to the different treatments prescribed by physician. A number of evidence clearly demonstrated that adherence is inversely proportional to the complexity of the therapeutic program. For instance, patients taking medication on a schedule of 4 times daily achieve an average rate of adherence of about 50%. This obviously represents a relevant problem since drugs can work in patients who don't take them. In this regard, it is absolutely clear that a good adherence is associated with a lower risk of events. Here we can see the greater reduction of the risk of chronic heart failure, coronary artery disease, and cerebrovascular disease in subjects with high adherence to the prescribed pharmacological treatment in comparison to those with low adherence. This data underline the great importance of intervention strategies aiming to improve therapeutic adherence in our elderly population. According to this evidence, current European guidelines for the management of arterial hypertension pose a strong emphasis on the importance of evaluating treatment adherence as a major cause of poor blood pressure control. I think that this relevant topic will be discussed by Professor Bournier, chairman of the European Society of Hypertension Working Group on Cardiovascular Pharmacotherapy and Adherence. I would only take first a few minutes of your time to briefly share with you the results of a recently published study on the topic of therapeutic adherence among elderly hypertensive patients. This study has been conducted with the organizing scientific support of Senior Italia Federanziani, the Italian Society of Hypertension, and the Italian Federation of General Practitioners. As you can see, we have enrolled a cohort of more than 50,000 treated elderly hypertensive patients. And the aim of this study was to evaluate in a real-world setting the adherence to antihypertensive treatment in elderly hypertensive patients and the blood pressure control rate in relation to different antihypertensive treatment patterns, including monotherapy, fixed dose, double or triple combination therapy, and free combination of 2 or 3 drugs. The first interesting finding of our study was the evidence that the large majority of patients, about 80%, were treated with a single pill, and about 1 out of 4 when fixed combination therapy of 2 or 3 drugs. This result is somewhat distant from the indication of current guideline for the management of arterial hypertension, which recommend a larger use of combination therapy in hypertensive patients. The second really interesting finding was the evidence that less than 50% of elderly hypertensive patients were fully adherent to the prescribed therapies, as indicated by a rate of adherence equal to or greater than 80% of the expected pill assumed. As you can see in this graph, the mean rate of adherence progressively decreased with the number of pills. Indeed, the lower adherence rate was observed in patients treated with 3 different antihypertensive pills. The third interesting finding was the evidence that the mean adherence progressively improved with increasing the number of active ingredients for pills. Indeed, the greater adherence was observed in patients treated with a single pills containing 3 antihypertensive drugs. As expected, also the fuel adherence progressively improved with the increase of the number of active ingredients per pill. Near the totality of the elderly hypertensive patients treated with a fixed combination of 3 antihypertensive drugs had a rate of adherence equal to or greater than 80% of the expected pill assumed. Taken together, these data indicate a direct association between a good adherence and the use of a fixed dose combination. As expected, blood pressure control was higher in elderly hypertensive patients treated with a fixed combination of antihypertensive drug. This finding is well evident in patients treated with a double fixed combination. The same trend was also observed in patients treated with a triple fixed combination. The lack of a statistical significance in this subgroup of patients likely reflects the relatively low number of patients in these subgroups. Taken together, our data demonstrated that individuals with controlled hypertension used less antihypertensive pills and a greater treatment adherence compared with the counterpart. These real-world data from treated elderly hypertensive patients suggest that simplified treatment strategies and the use of fixed combination pills improve adherence to the therapy and blood pressure control. In conclusion, the therapeutic program probably represents the most important determinant of the therapeutic success, since it represents the basis for a tight cooperation between physicians and patients. In particular, the therapeutic program should be safe, effective, and simple to be adopted by our patients. In this regard, combination therapy represents a useful pharmacological strategy for a patient-centered practice which should be applied to provide best care in the usual setting. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Desideri. It's really interesting to see how you have been able to demonstrate how in real life the adherence to therapy is lower than expected, because I know that it's not easy to convince patient and physician to follow the patient in order to achieve this result. And just for the audience, if you have any question, please use the chat beside the slide, just to submit questions to the speakers. And today, I would like to introduce a new project between Senior International Health Association and European Society of Hypertension in order to understand better which are the causes of no adherence in this kind of patients. And we have heard about the number of pills, and this is demonstrated, and now it's clear because it's an intuition, and that's okay. But why? There are other factors that maybe could be changed. If you look at this slide that I've just put in order to summarize Senior International Health Association is doing. We have put the patient in the center of the system. We know that the healthcare professionals are crucial in order to educate the patient, but on the other hand, we have to educate healthcare professionals too, in order how to teach the patient to take the pills. And as demonstrated, if we do not treat the patient at goal, we can't expect major result in order prevention of a heart attack or cerebrovascular disease. And that lead to an hospitalization cost increase. And we have to be able to allocate the resources according to the results expected. So for the reason, as mentioned before, Senior International Health Association and the European Society of Hypertension have run a project, a survey, in order to understand better which are the causes that in the elderly population there are less adherence. This project has been supported by Servier Pharma Company, and this is really important because all together we have the same objective: reduce the less adherence, and it's not easy, and this is the reason why we have all together work on this. And the aim of the project is to increase the patient awareness, and through the result of the survey, we will be able to assess the level of knowledge and concern about adherence and among the elderly population in 5 different target countries. The collaboration with scientific society and global patient group will allow us to disseminate and communicate the results through dedicated information, educational tools, driving the process of cultural change needed to improve health status. We hope that the result will also support institutional economic planning and resources allocation processes to optimize the sustainability of healthcare, especially for the elderly community. Now, we ask Professor Bournier how this issue is being approached in the European context and what work you are doing in the cardiovascular pharmacotherapy and adherence working group that you personally lead. Thank you, Professor Bournier, for joining us. You have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. De Plano. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's a real pleasure to be able to participate to discussion on how to drive the therapy adherence to improve patient health outcome. And as a member of the European Society of Hypertension, and you know that since the last guidelines in 2018, we are very much focused on the problem of adherence. And very recently, we have created a special working group on the cardiovascular therapy, lifestyle, and drug adherence. And I would like to, in this small presentation, give you the example of what we are doing in hypertension. You know, hypertension is the #1 killer around the world. I mean, it affects more than 1 billion people worldwide, and a lot of morbidity and mortalities are due to hypertension, mainly when it is untreated. See here. Just maybe, I mean, Professor Desideri already gave you some clues and on how to improve adherence with a single pill combination. But let me just remind you the actual situation of hypertension in older person. Of course, hypertension is very frequent in older person, and after the age of 60, the prevalence range between 53% and 72% in developed country. And over 80%, almost 80% of people are hypertensive or have an elevated blood pressure. Now, the problem is that still, like in the younger people, many people do not know that they are hypertensive, and about half of them are not treated. Now, even when they are treated, one of the issue is that the percentage of older patients treated for hypertension having a controlled blood pressure, and they say less than 140/90, because there are discussions about the target. Well, but then the rate of blood pressure control is low, usually around 30%. I was very glad to see Professor Desideri's numbers in Italy, which looks much better overall, but this is not the case in every European countries. In several countries, the control rate is even below 30%. Now, there are several issues on why blood pressure is not controlled. It's not only the fault of the patient, but it also sometimes links to the health systems and also to what we call the inertia of physicians. But non-adherence or poor adherence is a real problem. We know that more than 25% of patients aged 65 and 85 plus do not adhere to their treatment, and a lot of them stop their treatment after 1 year. And of course, this percentage increases with age and can reach more than 50%, mainly linked also to memory problems, to cognitive dysfunction that occurs, with advanced age. So if we took together these figures, it seems that we have a missed opportunity. A large proportion of older persons with an elevated blood pressure do not benefit from the treatment of hypertension, as we know that treating and lowering blood pressure is very effective in preventing cardiovascular complications. And I think this is really very important. On the next slide, I just summarize some of the consequences. We heard from previous speakers that there are economical issue and for the population. But what are the medical consequences of non-adherence? Well, first, of course, you have a suboptimal control of blood pressure. As said before, drugs do not work if you don't take them. So this is an evidence. So prescribing is not enough. But then we will have also more cases of severe hypertension, more preventable complications of hypertension, in particular cardiac disease and cerebrovascular disease, more hospitalization, more premature deaths, and a very significant impact on longevity in these patients. It will also generate more clinical visits and globally a very important increase in healthcare costs. So there is working on adherence and trying to improve adherence can only be a win-win situation. It will normally be positive for patients, positive for physicians, positive for hospitals, and also positive for the society and the healthcare system. So I think it's really an important topic. Just to illustrate maybe one issue, I think that we should really communicate also to patients is that if you take your medication as prescribed, you really decrease your risk of being hospitalized for a cardiovascular complication. And on these slides, you have two illustrations. The first is on the risk of being hospitalized for coronary events in green or for a cerebrovascular event. And you see that if you have a very low adherence, you do not benefit at all. But if you take more than 75% of your drug as prescribed, then you reduce your risk of being admitted to hospital for one of these complications is reduced by 25%. I mean, this is really significant. And if you look here on the right, the risk of hospitalization for heart failure is even greatly reduced by 34% if your patients take their treatment as prescribed at more than 75%. Of course, the idea that 75% is an arbitrary number, and of course the best if you take it really regularly all the time, knowing that this is quite difficult in real life. Now I like this summaries of all the components of the framework of drug adherence, and this is called a define, measure, analyze, improve, and control approach. So in the last 10 to 15 years, we have made, we have to admit, we have made several big progress in the field of adherence because more and more people are interested. Well, first, now we have a clear taxonomy of what is non-adherence and the separation between being persistent or being adherent and to initiation of the treatment. We have also many improvement in the way to measure non-adherence. You know, for a long time, the only questions we have was, do you take your pills? And patients will say, yes, of course, because they like to please their doctors. But now we have more, let's say, obvious and evidence that to measure adherence, for example, measuring drugs in the urines or with also e-prescriptions and e-refills follow-up. Now we know how to analyze also very much the impact of a non-adherence. But I think it's time now, and this today is a very important day, because we should really implement ways of improving. And as Dr. De Plano said, I think we have to inform people, and when we have also to know a little bit more what patients actually feel about it. And we have actually very little data about the patient's perspective. So we have one of the intention is really to increase the awareness among patients on the, let's say, side effect of non-adherence. We can also provide social support to improve them and to help them take their medications. But there is not only the problems of patients, there are also the problem of healthcare providers, physicians and nurses. And we need definitely to educate healthcare providers. In a previous survey we made about among health excellent centers in Europe, we found that 60% of people who take care of hypertension every day had never received any teaching on how to assess adherence and to discuss with patients about this topic. So there is definitely a medical need, but also an educational need for healthcare providers. And this is the reason why we actually elaborate a new collaborative project on adherence between the working group on adherence of the European Society of Hypertension and Servier company. And we develop a new partnership, including actually two projects at the moment. The first is a patient survey in arterial hypertension on the patient's perspective on treatment adherence. And this will be done in the collaboration with the SEHA, but also with other partners having direct contact with the patient's organization. The aim of this survey is really to better understand how patients perceive their treatment and the burden of taking different medications to control their blood pressure. We know it's not easy to take drugs every day. We know that forgetting drugs is very usual, but we have also to know what patients think so we can actually work with them to find solutions to improve. Now, the second aspect of the project, as I mentioned, is an educational project for healthcare providers on how to address adherence issue with patients. And this will be conducted in partnership with Servier during the mainly ESH meetings, for example, or also in the summer school where we teach younger physicians to the field of hypertension. And here, the idea is really to teach how to talk to patients, how to listen to patients, what are their problems with adherence, and also to find clues and solutions to help them supporting their adherence in the long run. As you know, the project will run, has already started, but it will run between October 2021, so next month, and 2023. And I think we really help us in doing this survey with patients. I think it's very, very important. And we also would like to say other partners like the Global Health Hub that will also participate in this project. I thank you for your auditions, and I will be ready to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gounier. A really interesting presentation, and we are so proud to be part of these future projects. Just let me highlight that we would love to be part also of the second step of this project because, as mentioned before, the patients are in the center of the system. So you're right, we have to educate the healthcare professional, but on the other hand, we as a networking or patient association will be able to educate directly the patient. But we are really proud that European Society of Hypertension is doing this kind of initiative in order to improve. We are talking about longevity, and we have to increase the expectation at a better life. Okay, now let me now hand over to the question and answer to the audience. If we have any questions, let me see. Yes, I have a question for Professor Desideri. Professor Desideri, in your experience of direct contact with patients, so real life, do you think that poor patient knowledge may be a cause of poor adherence to treatment? What do you think you can do to better communicate the value of therapy to patients?
I think that this point is really crucial. We have to communicate to our patients the importance of tight blood pressure control. This is particularly true for our elderly population, but I think that is particularly true for all hypertensive patients. For instance, we have a number of evidence that high blood pressure represents a key determinant for the onset and progression of dementia. Actually, dementia represents a main problem for our elderly population, since we simply do not have drugs effective in improving the quality of life of these patients. Actually, the only way that we have to reduce the burden of dementia in elderly population is represented an improvement of control of blood pressure. So we have to communicate to our patients the importance to be adherent to the prescribed pharmacological treatment in order to prevent cardiovascular event, renal event, cerebrovascular event, dementia, and in particular to have a good probability to achieve a successful aging.
Thank you, Professor Desideri, for this answer. And I have a question from you to Professor Bournier. Someone is asking themselves, what other factors may be involved in improving adherence to therapy? Are cognitive aspects also important?
Yeah, of course, cognitive aspect, especially in the elderly populations, is very important. And, you know, there are a lot of solutions to support, for example, kind of reminders or week organizer, for example, for the drugs that, because of the development of cognitive decline, which actually we try to prevent by treating hypertension. It's one of, you know, it's a circle. We try to prevent it by treating correctly hypertension, and we know it works. The evidence is not very strong, but we do have some evidence for that. And of course, when it has started, this cognitive decline will probably limit the adherence. So we need also to involve very often the family, the neighbors, or other, you know, people around the patient to try to support to maintain a good adherence.
Thank you, Professor Bournier. You're right. It's a circle, and we have to try to do the best in order to improve this. I have a general question for both of you. We have seen that less than 50% of population is not adherent to therapy. Think about our personal experience. I'm talking about in the name of the audience. What we have at home, parents, family, etc., that are taking pills. Just the take-home message. What can we do in order to change? Just starting from home. each of us?
Well, you know what I try to say to all my patients, and you know, I also have to take pills every day. So first, as a doctors, we have to admit that it's not easy to take drugs every day, and you know, we should not blame them for that. Now, the second thing that we should also recognize, it's the 50%, it looks very high, but you have to recognize also that non-adherence is a very dynamic process. You know, from some periods, people are very adherent. Suddenly, for 1 or 2 weeks, they have other problems. They are non-adherent. So they go back and forth. And that's why, you know, so having support, trying to having reminders, and also to link the drug consumption with something they do every day. I think this is probably the easiest way to improve adherence. But my point is really, it's not easy to take drugs. So let's discuss about it.
I completely agree with Professor Bournier. I think that we have to try any efforts to improve our ability to communicate to our patient the importance to be adherent, the consequence of a poor adherence, since we often observe a cosmetic approach, that is, a patient take drug but don't achieve blood pressure control or lipid control and so on. I think that these represent a really problem. Obviously, we have to simplify our therapeutic scheme, since it's quite common in our elderly population to observe 10 or more prescription of drug, and this represents a really problem, since it can induce a mistake in terms of function, side effect. We have the possibility to simplify therapeutic approach by using combination therapy and by using the prescription, since sometimes we observe preventive approach in patients, we probably do not have a life expectancy too long to observe a protective effect of a determined approach.
Thanks. I have another question, not me, but from the audience to Professor Bournier. What do you believe may be the best way to measure actual adherence to therapy in high blood pressure?
Yes, I think this is it's an excellent question. In the survey we made among excellent centers, we identified that talking with the patients remains the number one way of trying to identify non-adherence. And that's what probably 80% of physicians use. Now, the problem is that we know that if you do not ask the good questions, and then the reliability of the discussion is relatively low. Again, because patients want to please you. So today in hypertension, what we see rapidly developing is measuring drugs in urine. And you have more and more centers, reference centers doing that. With the new technologies, it's very easy, it's simple, and the price may not be so high. Of course, it will depend from country to country. But this is the only way to have actually an objective measurement. You know, and that's what we need, objective measurements. Be sure that the drug is there, and measuring the drugs in the urine is probably the only way that we can really have certain that some drugs have been taken. But with this technique, we found, for example, that in apparent resistant hypertension, up to 50% of people, you find no drugs in the urine. Even though they're supposed to have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, you find nothing. So you see, I think that's the big issue, and we need more objective measurements in the future.
Thank you, Professor Bournier. The last question is for Senior International Health Association and for European Site Hypertension. they are asking which country will be involved in this project. And just to answer really quickly, we will have Germany, Spain, UK, France, and Italy. And it will be the main country involved in this first part of the project to collect the data with the survey. Okay, close this interesting debate that we have developed this morning together on the challenges and the opportunity of such a high priority issue as adherence to therapy, we hand over to Professor Kreutz to ask if there are new lines of research on the subject and what we can expect in the future in the treatment for hypertension and associated risk factors. So, Professor Kreutz, the floor is yours.
Dear Vice President Castaldo, dear President Messina, given the undisputed importance of high blood pressure and hypertension among the chronic diseases of old age, it is indeed a pleasure and an inner obligation for the European Society of Hypertension and for me personally to support today's important event. Let me thank you and also all participants and supporters very much for organizing or contributing to this important event. This initiative is exactly in line with our approach in the ESH, which is based on the three important pillars, namely collaboration between stakeholders in the healthcare system, research, and education. And Professor Bonnier has presented an important example of our ESH research and implementation projects, as we are convinced that adherence to treatment is central to a positive development of our health systems, including our mission to prevent and reduce hypertension and its associated morbidity and mortality. And this is also important for the well-being for the increasing number of older persons in our countries. Now, in this regard, let me show just one final slide that highlights the importance of adherence to hypertension treatment. This slide demonstrates the increasing prevalence of atrial fibrillation, up to 30% we face already now in persons older than 80 years, using data from my country, Germany. Atrial fibrillation, being the most important cardiac arrhythmia, often results from uncontrolled hypertension and induces a major burden in older people by impairing quality of life, causing strokes and death. Many of these cases can be prevented by adherence to antihypertensive treatment, as discussed today. Again, many thanks to all, and microphone over to President Messina for his closing remarks.
I am truly honored and glad for all the contribution shared on this day, starting with the message received from the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Once again, I would like to thank Vice President Castaldo for his tireless commitment. I am convinced that with this new project, illustrated in a very clear and exhaustive way by the speakers, with the promoted ESH and the Senior International Health Association, thanks to institutional support of Servier, will be able to shed light on the main causes of no adherence to therapy. We will also give an important contribution to policymakers so that they can adopt the best strategies in order to improve therapeutic adherence and consequently they offer healthier longevity to seniors across Europe. Thank you all for participating in this important event. Have a nice day and God bless Europe. Thank you, all people.